Hello, good evening,
Evening,
guys. This
guys.
is Michelle Diamond with Team In the House Media and Next Level Promotion. And on today's segment, we have the amazing Dr. John Lipman of the Atlanta Fibroid Center. And he's here this evening to educate the masses on fibroids and what causes fibroids, what we can do to seek the help and just educate because a lot of females, unfortunately, with fibroids normally think that the only hope is to have a hysterectomy, and he's here to give options. We have options, and I'm so grateful researching Dr. Lippman, having the pleasure of meeting him and his wife over Thanksgiving, doing his community service, just being such a staple in the community, giving back. And he is exemplary in his work as well as his ethics and just his love for community. And I feel that the support is warranted because he's an amazing person. And I would like for him to just speak to you guys and give a little bit of his background and what pushed him in the direction of actually pursuing his doctoral in this area.
Well, thanks for having me on. That was really nice. Hopefully I can play this back for my mom. Those were really kind words. I appreciate it.
It's the truth. It's the truth.
Fibroids are my passion, no doubt about it. I've been practicing here in Atlanta for the past well over 30 years, and my life's work and passion is uterine fibroids. And the biggest take-home message I can say is that for women that are struggling with symptomatic fibroids, you don't have to have surgery. As you mentioned, hysterectomy is commonly what is offered to patients. And typically when a woman is struggling with fibroids, and particularly if she's not interested in having any future fertility, oftentimes the gynecologist will tell the patient struggling with fibroids, particularly if she's not interested in children, they'll offer hysterectomy, and that will be it. That'll be the only option given to patients. And as I say, one of the most important things we can talk about tonight is that there are other options, and there's a particularly outstanding option that we do at the Atlanta Fibroid Center, and that is uterine fibroid embolization,
Yes.
UFE. It's also called uterine artery embolization. It's one of the biggest medical breakthroughs for women. The problem, as I mentioned, is that most women are unaware of it, despite the fact I've been doing it here in Atlanta for the past 25 years, and it's available throughout the country. So if there are people listening that can't get to Atlanta, it's available in any of the larger communities throughout the country. So it's a tremendous procedure. It's outpatient. There's no surgery. Patients go home the same day with a Band-Aid, and they get their life back. It's transformational. Women that are suffering with fibroids often have just miserable periods. It's the most common reason why they have those. They also have significant pelvic pain and urinary frequency, maybe painful intercourse or constipation even. These fibroids press on things. They cause all sorts of misery. But the good news is we can take care of it very nicely without any operation. The woman can get the relief she's looking for. She can avoid the risks and long recovery of an operation. And importantly, she can get to keep her uterus. We can talk about what happens to women when they lose their uterus, particularly at a younger age.
Wow, that's awesome. So tell us a little bit about what you know what the patients can expect with this procedure.
Sure.
Being non-invasive.
Yeah, it's completely non-invasive. The patients that undergo UFE, they come into the center early in the morning. The procedure takes me 30 minutes or so. They sleep through it, but they're not put to sleep like an operation. The sedation is IV and local. It's much nicer no general anesthesia like an operation. And then there's a several-hour recovery in our center, and the patient is literally discharged home with a Band-Aid.
Wow.
A Band-Aid at the top of their leg where we enter. There's a recovery at home, usually about 5 days or so. So I tell patients anticipate a week, but a lot of patients go back well before a week, particularly if they're able to work from home during all this COVID stuff.
Okay. So I know, and I'm just going to put myself out there. It does run in my family, and with us, the menstrual is usually on the heavier side. So how does this help manage, heavy menstruals for women?
Well, it manages in that fibroids are the most common reason why women have heavy periods. And sometimes women don't realize what's heavy. Certainly, heavy menstrual periods, in my opinion, is a significant health issue that's largely underreported and underappreciated by a lot of healthcare professionals and the women they serve. It's multifactorial, the reasons why. I mean, doctors and other healthcare providers that might see these patients, you don't get a lot of physician time these days with most doctors, and they're coming in quickly, and they may not appreciate the significance of a woman's periods. You might ask a woman, are your periods heavy? And she may say no, even though they're terribly heavy.
Correct.
Because she's been doing it for so long, she doesn't realize that that's abnormal.
It's routine, correct.
So that's just her normal. Well, that's not normal. You've got to dig deeper, and you have to ask her about specifically, how many pads do you use in a day?
Saturate, correct.
Are any of the days where you change more frequently than every 3 hours, or if you use more than 2 pads at a time, or if you see clots bigger than a quarter, certainly.
Correct.
Or you get these episodes of blood gushing out or flooding. If you can't sleep on your nice linens, or you're afraid to sit on your girlfriend's nice furniture, or if you're doubling up on pads, or if you wear adult diapers on heavy days, or if there are days where you can't work or can't leave the house, all of those things are too heavy. It doesn't matter how long you've been doing them. It's not normal. And so when fibroids are the cause of the heavy bleeding, I can fix that very nicely with UFE. UFE, how we do it is we enter each uterine artery separately. There's 2, one on each side, and each of the uterine arteries branch like a tree, getting smaller and smaller branches till you get out to the leaves of the tree. That's the fibroids. I know what size those tiny peripheral branches are, and I can plug them up with these little tiny particles. And without a blood supply, the fibroids will die. And as they die, they soften and shrink. And as that occurs, a woman's symptoms go away. So when we see these women in follow-up 3 months after the procedure, instead of these gushy, floody, crime scene-like periods, their periods are light and normal. They're transformed. And so when you lose that amount of blood each month, there are consequences. It's called anemia. When you lose all this iron and hemoglobin in your blood, you become tired, chronically fatigued.
Yes.
Exercise goes out the window. Often sex goes out the window. You get lightheaded. You get dizzy. You might get migraine-like headaches. You might chew or crave ice. Some people chew and crave inedible things.
Right, cornstarch.
Cornstarch, the argo is a big one.
Yes.
In Georgia, the Georgia white clay.
Yes, in the islands, yes.
And it's called pica. And so we can fix that when the periods return to a light normal period. They're not losing all this excess iron and hemoglobin. And so now the red cells are back to normal in quantity and can carry oxygen again. And the patient's energy level is through the roof. They can't believe, how much better they feel. They're back to normal instead of running on such a low tank. So all the pica goes away, the chronic fatigue goes away, the headaches disappear, all of the clinical signs of anemia. We've had patients that have had hair loss worse than mine. Mine's permanent. but yours is temporary. It'll grow back. And so if you can fix the problem, sometimes women will, be diagnosed with anemia and they get either oral iron, which is often poorly absorbed, or they'll get IV iron. And again, you're just kind of bailing water out of a sinking boat with the iron. It doesn't fix the problem. You've got to put the plug back in the bottom of the boat. And that's where UFE fixes the problem rather than just bailing water like the iron infusions.
Right. So let me pose this question to you because, of course, you hit the nail on several pointers that I actually wanted to pose, and you're just going right into it. And I appreciate that. With someone that has been diagnosed with anemia and also has a sickle cell trait myself, and of course, I've been tested and they're like, oh, we don't see any signs of fibroids. But then, my specialists now, they're saying, they pretty much told me, hey, I don't want you to, continue taking as much of the iron medication that you're on now, because with the sickle cell traits, your hemoglobin levels are going to be on the lower side anyway. And then if you do too much iron intake, that could cause other adverse reactions to different things. So
well, you have to be careful with the amount of iron. As you said, if iron that's in excess will get deposited, and so you got to make sure that your iron levels don't get too high. That, as you mentioned, that can be a problem. But for women struggling with fibroids, usually the iron is low and sometimes drastically low. And there you really got to fix the problem. You can give patients iron. It's oftentimes they're given iron because surgeons can't operate on women when their iron is low and their hemoglobin is low. That's not an issue with UFE. So the surgeons will often refer the patient to a hematologist to get iron and sometimes blood.
Yes.
But we don't need to do that. In fact, I see a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses that can't accept blood products. We don't need to worry about it because we're not doing any surgery. There's no blood loss at all with UFE. It's completely bloodless, and it doesn't matter what a patient's iron or hemoglobin level is. We can go right to the source and fix the problem, which is the fibroids.
Right. So with that, would you say that that could possibly be an early indication if a woman pretty much experiencing the symptoms that we just discussed, the heavy menstrual, clotting bigger than a quarter and, and so forth. But then the tests are showing that, no, there's no fibroids. Could that be an early detection that something is brewing?
Well, it usually means that there's something else. There are other causes for heavy menstrual bleeding. There can be other structural things that are less common. Certainly fibroids is number one by far. It's way more common than any of these other things that I'm going to mention, but sometimes there's a condition called adenomyosis, which can cause heavy bleeding. You can think of adenomyosis as endometriosis that involves the uterus. And we can also embolize that just like we embolize fibroids.
Wow.
It can be due to uterine polyps. Polyps are tiny little growths along the lining of the uterus and cause really heavy bleeding. And so that is something that the gynecologist can remove from the inside because it's a little growth on the lining. They can just go in vaginally and remove these growths if that's what the cause is. Now, sometimes there are non-structural reasons. So unlike a fibroid or a polyp, there can be non-structural causes like polycystic ovarian syndrome is a condition where there's an elevation of a woman's testosterone level that throws off her periods, making them irregular and causing heavy flow in a number of these women. Sometimes it's a condition of the thyroid. Thyroid problems are connected to fibroids, and so if you have the thyroid abnormality, that needs to be checked. So if you have heavy bleeding and it's not fibroids, you still need to find out why that is. But the most common reason by far is fibroids.
The uterus. Wow. Well, I appreciate you, going in and telling us the, different symptoms and, different, possible causes to heavy flows and what, we can actually get checked for. So with that, we know that the symptoms vary in type and severity. And, how does diet and exercise all play into this?
Well, nobody knows where fibroids come from, but once they arrive on the scene, they grow with estrogen and progesterone to some degree, but estrogen is the main fuel. And it's impossible to avoid hormones. They're throughout the foods and water supply, even. Um, but there are certain foods that are kind of hormone rich, red meat, non organic chicken, and dairy. And so when we see a patient at the Atlanta Fibroid Center, we talk about these kind of modifications that you can do to your diet, trying to avoid or limit hormone rich foods, trying to increase the consumption of colored fruits and vegetables.
Mm,
Colored fruits and vegetables have flavonoids in them, and flavonoids block an important enzyme in the production of estrogen. That's helpful. Um, Estrogen is stored and produced in fat. And so, one of the reasons why African American women disproportionately suffer with fibroids more than other racial groups is, in
right.
general, they have more body fat than others. If you look at body fat distribution by race, um, African American are at the top, and
Yes.
Asian is at the lowest, and that's the
Lowest.
same for incidence of fibroids. Now, that's not the only thing; it's multifactorial. It also runs genetically stronger in families of color, and you
Mhm.
mentioned that that was the case with you. Um,
Correct.
that's a very common thing. But you can't do anything about your genetics. But you can do these dietary modifications, losing excess body fat, exercise, make healthy eating choices. Because if you do those things, you can definitely improve your fibroid symptoms. Absolutely, no doubt about it. And the one other additional thing that is really important is making sure that your vitamin D level is adequate. Vitamin D is actually a hormone, technically, it's not a vitamin, but um, vitamin D is a very powerful anti-fibroid growth hormone. And so only 10% of African American men or women have adequate vitamin D. It,
I'm not
it's
one.
it based on the pigmentation of your skin.
Correct.
The darker it is, the harder it is to absorb adequate vitamin D.
Indeed.
Um, and so it's easy to check. And if you need to be supplemented, that's a really important thing to do because um, your risk factor for fibroid or suffering with fibroids is dramatically reduced with a normal vitamin D level. It also
Mm,
is helpful for COVID. It has a lot of immune boosting properties that are really important in our battle against COVID.
wow, that's amazing. I appreciate that. So I know on your site, which is ATLII.com, and for anyone who's interested, that's ATLII.com, where we, amazing testimonials and kudos to you and your entire staff. You have some amazing, staff and team mates there. And I saw that you also an exercise so about that link and why it's important for them to follow.
You kind of cut out on me. I didn't hear that part.
Can you hear me? Oh,
I can
okay.
hear you.
No problem. No, I wanted you to let the viewers know what. Can you hear me now?
Yep,
You can hear me now? Okay.
I can hear you.
On the site, there are links to the e-brochures,
Oh, okay.
and I
Yep.
wanted you to, yes, the diet plan and the exercise plan, and why that's so important after they have the UFE.
Yeah, it's really important that if they can modify behavior, it's their best kind of way to prevent any further fibroids. Now, once the patient has a UFE and all the fibroids hopefully are dead, it will be a long time, if ever, a patient will have any kind of worries about fibroids. If they're in their 40s when they have the embolization, typically that's all they'll ever need ever again. Now, it's always nice to have the right diet and exercise, because even though you may not need it for your fibroids, if you've had the UFE procedure, it's still going to be good for your overall health, your cardiovascular health. But sometimes women want to know, they have fibroids, their symptoms aren't terrible, and they want to know, well, what can I do to try to improve on this? It's probably not severe enough where I need a UFE or certainly surgery, but I want to do whatever I can to try to improve these milder symptoms. And as I say, exercise, losing excess body fat, making healthy eating choices, increase colored fruits and vegetables, limit or reduce the amount of consumption of hormone-rich foods, and making sure that you have adequate vitamin D, all are very important, and should be able to improve the symptoms enough, at least to maintain for a while. Now, eventually, they probably will get worse, and if they do, UFE is a tremendous procedure to be able to help them avoid any surgery whatsoever and treat those fibroid symptoms very effectively.
Awesome. Now, what would you say would be the defining factor as to where you say, hey, a UFE would not work for you and we would have to resort to a partial or a full hysterectomy?
Well, almost anyone that's been told they need a hysterectomy for fibroids is a candidate for UFEs, no matter what your gynecologist tells you. Because, frankly, most gynecologists don't really know enough about UFE. They've heard about it, but they really don't know who's a candidate, who's not. They're surgeons, and surgeons, for the most part, love to operate. And so that's why most only tell patients about the surgical choices, when really they're obligated to mention all the options, not just the surgical ones that they can do. They really need to mention UFE. And unfortunately, while some do, the majority clearly do not. And UFE has been available now for 25 years. It's well proven safe and effective. And yet, as I say, most women have never heard about it. And that's a real shame, because it truly is one of the biggest medical breakthroughs for women. But rarely, there are some rare occasions where the fibroid, the uterus and fibroids are just so massive that maybe this would be something better handled surgically. But there are very unusual circumstances where a patient really would be better served with an operation. It does occur. We do see them from time to time. But for the vast majority of people, they do great with UFE and can easily substitute it and avoid a major operation. Because, as I say, once the uterus goes above the belly button, which is not that uncommon, when the uterus enlarges to the belly button, that's a 4-month pregnant-sized uterus. That's pretty typical for what we see every day at the Atlanta Fibroid Center. But when it starts getting above the belly button, and that's not that uncommon, the surgery that's done is a vertical incision from the breastbone all the way down vertically to the pubic hairline. It's a big time operation. And when it's at the belly button maybe and below, it's still big time surgery. It's a horizontal incision from one hip to the other. So vertical is certainly worse, but both are very invasive. And while you'll hear about robotic surgery or laparoscopic surgery, a lot of these fibroids and uteruses are so big that there's no room to do any laparoscopic anything. So the vast majority of hysterectomies for fibroids are done open surgery, either horizontal like a long C-section, or as I mentioned, vertically for the really big uteruses.
Wow. Well, I'm so grateful that, we have an option with the UFE and, you're spreading the word. So, how can we help to spread the word further about the choices that we have? You know, you don't have to have a hysterectomy. You could do something, non invasive, and contact, Dr. Littman and his staff. How are we going to get this out to more people? Because
Well,
I
we
mentioned it, and a lot of people are very, uneducated about it. They
right.
don't
It, it's
know.
it's every woman that has been told they need surgery for their fibroids should at least get a second opinion from an experienced interventional radiologist like myself. As I say, I'm not a gynecologist, I'm an interventional radiologist.
Yes.
We are physicians that are specifically trained in these minimally invasive targeted treatments that replace surgery all over the body. And we've been available, and the procedures have been available for a long time. But unfortunately, most women suffering don't hear about this. But hopefully, we continue to try to spread the word. So, certainly, social media and the internet have been important tools to be able to try to get more awareness. I'm commonly out talking in the community, speaking all over physician groups, lay groups, mega churches, women's groups. Um,
Awesome.
this is somewhat of an embarrassing topic to talk about your periods and heavy bleeding. And it's been kind of a taboo subject. And
Yes.
oftentimes there's a lot of shame associated with this. And there shouldn't be. We should eliminate period shame, and we should eliminate period poverty, which exists in this country, but is a huge problem globally. There are
Correct.
a lot of young girls and women that don't have the means to be able to afford sanitary products. I mean, it's just awful to think about. We do a lot
Yes.
to support an international effort to try to end period poverty. We do work with a
Yes.
group called Huru International. They do great work. They um, provide these products to young girls and women. We work with a group here in Atlanta, You First. Erica Wright is an angel.
Erica, yes, I love Erica. She is
Oh,
amazing.
she's an
Yes.
absolute angel.
Yes.
And we support him. She puts together these hygiene kits for the
Kids
homeless
for the homeless.
and
Yes.
for economically impoverished and homeless individuals. And within the hygiene kit are menstrual products for women, and we provide those menstrual products for her hygiene kits that she disseminates throughout the Atlanta
Yes.
community. And God bless her for her work.
Absolutely.
I can't say enough great things about her.
Yes.
She's truly an angel in our midst.
Yes, and so are you. And that's why I so love the circle, the networking circle that we have, because, they're filled with amazing people, and you all are so humble. And that's what I'm very big on, is the humility factor of everything. Because the work that you all do within the community and educating people, period, a lot of people normally would charge for these services, and you all are just open and willing to give it freely. And that's why I think you absolutely needed to come on, so that you could spread the word and people understand. I would just like to read this portion that I have on you. And I love it because it says that you are a physician with a mission. And I absolutely believe that, where you are, a critical aspect of Dr. Littman's mission includes educating the public about fibroids and UFE. Equally important, he helps other physicians become better informed about uterine fibroids and their treatment. As a passionate speaker to community groups, Dr. Littman also ensures that UFE is recognized as a minimally invasive treatment option for fibroids. He delivers lectures on UFE to leading medical centers, including Harvard, Vanderbilt, and Stanford universities, as well as national and international medical conferences. So you have contributed your time, your voice, and it's just humbling. And this, makes me appreciate you even more, and your contributions to the community. As you said, you've done so much, health centers, and even with Erica. And, she was one of, my actual charities for the Philly weekend in Atlanta, and it's definitely a small circle. And of course, she was gifted the van through Tyler Perry Studios last year as well. And I just believe that this circle that we have together, Georgia Spartans, shout out to Jarrell and his wife and the entire team, you know, Dr. Jerome Dorn with In the House Media. The motto, and we were just discussing this earlier, is we welcome everyone in the house, and all we ask is that you pay it forward, because the level of expertise and professionalism within this circle alone, a lot of people charge consultation fees for, but we as a collective group are willing to give this to all that are just willing to listen and work together to help uplift the community.
No,
And
no
I
question
so
about it.
appreciate
It's
you.
we feel very strongly about our commitment. We're part of this community, and we feel a strong commitment to give where we can and when we
Yes,
can. And um, it's just important to be a good citizen, and we like to help in the community as much as we can. And sometimes it's through stuff we're doing ourselves, and sometimes we're hitching our wagon to like the Georgia Spartans, and giving
right.
away those turkeys for Thanksgiving. That was a tremendous event, and you know we
Yes,
partner with those that are really out there doing a great work. And so
yes,
sometimes it's us, and sometimes we're partnering with others and trying to hitch our wagon to something that we can really support and get behind, like that effort.
absolutely. And yes, and we cannot forget Mama Camp. Shout out to Mama K Camp, because she's heavily in the community as well, and definitely a part of the circle. And we appreciate you all. So I wanted you to also let the viewers know about the other treatments that you also offer, because a lot of people are like, oh, they're talking fibroids and oh, menstruals, and yes, it's taboo sometimes, but that's because people didn't understand the choices, or even know that there's an underlying, health factor that's going on, and they're thinking, like you said, it's normal, and it's not. And I'm glad that we were able to educate people. But you offer migraine headache treatments. Um,
Yeah, we are. The common thread of our practice is conditions that are seen exclusively in women, like fibroids, or at least primarily in women. And migraines are something that do affect women more than men.
yes.
And we have a very simple treatment for migraines. Usually, we're seeing someone that has a very disabling chronic migraine. There, almost every family physician or internal medicine practice has several patients that they're really stuck. They've tried a number of different medicines for migraine. They may have had Botox injections. They may have
Right.
had even sometimes surgery, unfortunately. And so we do a very simple, basically, it's a nerve block, which is done without any needles whatsoever. It's
Oh,
done intranasally under x ray guidance. So it's a
wow.
very simple approach to deliver an anesthetic in the nose into each nostril one at a time. And it anesthetizes a ganglion that's important in transmission of pain for migraines, for dental pain, uh, even TMJ. It's through the trigeminal nerve, which is the fifth cranial nerve, and it's largely responsible for this pain. And with a
Right.
very simple procedure that takes less than 10 minutes, the patients can drive themselves in and 10 minutes later drive themselves out
Wow.
this procedure. So it's a simple way to try to break chronic migraine, which can be really disabling for a lot of people. And um,
Absolutely.
so it's fibroids are clearly the emphasis in our practice, but we do have some other really nice stories and nice procedures that we can provide women that have over the years kind of challenged us to provide you know solutions for these problems that are often very disabling for women.
Hmm, awesome. And I know I read about a lot of things. So we also have the option of doing permanent birth control and even some treatment for female infertility and vertebral compression fractures. Tell us a little bit about those.
Well, there's a procedure called kyphoplasty, which is basically a non-surgical way to treat osteoporotic compression fractures of the spine. As we age, particularly women have osteoporosis commonly, and that can lead to fractures of the vertebral column. And so, again, it can be very disabling, and particularly in the elderly, where the treatment is usually bracing, which doesn't help very well, or giving them narcotics, which either constipates the heck out of them or makes them so dopey they can't function. So they just lay around in bed. This allows actually treating the fracture non-surgically by directly guiding this cannula into the broken vertebra and injecting bone cement and really providing a strut and to not only kind of distract and correct the fracture to some degree, but also provide the important pain relief. So you reduce the fracture as best you can, and then you provide a support by this bone cement in the vertebral body. And it's a very great story that can really restore people's quality of life really immediately after the procedure. We did a patient that was in their 90s and was living independently, had fallen in the garden and fractured one of her lumbar vertebra. And the orthopedic surgeon that knew of our work in kyphoplasty said, "Do you have an upper limit for age?" And I said, "No, not really. Are they, what's their function status?" "Well, she lives independently." And that's all I really had to hear. And, she had lived independently, fell, and since the fracture, she'd been in bed for 3 days, on narcotics, because basically she couldn't function. She was either, narcotics really affect the elderly, particularly someone over 90.
Yes.
So she was just basically in bed. But the day after the kyphoplasty, she was back in the garden, back to her baseline. And so
awesome.
Just like the fibroids, these are other gratifying stories that we can really intervene non-surgically in patients. And that's what interventional radiologists do every day. They are leaders in these minimally invasive targeted treatments that replace surgery all over the body.
That's so awesome. I appreciate it. Well, Dr. Lippman, I'm grateful that you took time to grace us with your presence this evening and, just allowing the viewers of this segment to, understand a little bit more about, fibroids and the options that are out there. Also, the other treatments that you do have at, the Atlanta Fibroid Center. So we know that you have multiple ways of being connected to the viewers and whoever would like to get a consultation. Of course, the phone number is 678-679-6669 if you'd like to contact the Atlanta Fibroid Center via phone. Once again, that's 678-679-6669. And, on the website, it is atlii.com. And he's on Instagram as Dr. _Lippman.
That's right.
And all the information is there on his page. On Facebook, I do know that it's under Atlanta Interventional Institute.
That's right.
And for the other sites, I would like for you to share for me.
Yeah, the other sites.
YouTube.
For YouTube, it's Atlanta Fibroid Center. So if someone is more visual and wants to look at videos, and they can even watch a documentary that we did. It was nominated for a medical Emmy.
Yes.
We didn't win, but we were nominated, and it's a little bit under an hour, but we followed a number of women that were told they had to have hysterectomy or myomectomy surgery for fibroids.
Right.
And fortunately, at the last minute, they found us, and they got the UFE procedure and got their life back. And so it follows these
Amazing.
women's struggles and stories. It features Cynthia Bailey from Real Housewives of Atlanta. Monica Kaufman did the narration. It's just you watch these stories and you really start to get an idea of what women struggle with. In fact, we're really grateful when men show up for these talks that we have, because I think one of the biggest problems is that men don't really understand about women's periods. Oftentimes they kind of stiff arm it and don't want to know, but it's really, really important they understand what the women in their lives are going through.
Absolutely.
So they can empathize with it and really understand it, because, it really does affect them, even if they don't think it does. If your significant other is suffering with this, it's affecting you too. So it's really important. And so that they can watch the documentary, and we have over 150 videos on that YouTube channel.
Yes. And I saw some amazing testimonials, and, even a few men commented, and it's just breathtakingly beautiful. So, I appreciate you so much. And of course, like I said, our services are always extended, our doors, our arms are always open. I appreciate you and Mrs. Lippman. She's just an angel as well. So thank you, Mrs. Lippman, for everything that you do as well. And Dr. Lippman, I cannot say enough about you. I appreciate Jarrell and the whole team, Georgia Spartans, and all those that, support all of us collectively as a whole. Thank you guys so very much. And again, contact him at 678-679-6669. If you'd like to just do the phone call. And of course, you could email. All of that information is on the side. Check out the videos. Dr. Lippman, I like to say, is the truth. And we are going to educate everyone on UFEs and let you know that you have an option. So thank you again for joining us on this segment of House Call. And Dr. Lippman, it's an honor.
Thanks for having me. It was great. Hopefully people will reach out, and we'd be happy to see them and help them.
Absolutely. And we are always here, and whatever we can do to continue in the education process, we are all hands in. You are only a phone call away. So thank you again.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Until next time, guys, this is Michelle Diamond and Dr. John Lippman of the Atlanta Fibroid Center on this segment of House Call, educating you guys on fibroids and your choice of UFEs. Bye.